Good morning. Jesus appoints the 12. Jesus went up on a mountainside and called to him those he wanted, and they came to him. He appointed 12, that they might be with him and that they might send them out to preach, and to have authority to drive out demons. These are the 12 he appointed: Simon, to whom he gave the name Peter; James, son of Zebedee, and his brother John, to which he gave the name Boanerges, which means sons of thunder; Andrew, Philip, Bartholomew, Matthew, Thomas, James, son of Alphaeus, Thaddeus, Simon the Zealot, and Judas Iscariot, who betrayed him. Verse 32. A crowd was sitting around him, and they told him, "Your mother and brothers are outside looking for you." "Who are my mother and brothers?" he asked. Then he looked at those seated in a circle around him and said, "Here are my mother and my brothers. Whoever does God's will is my brother and sister and mother."
Recently, I was talking with a good friend of mine who's from India, and she was discussing this internal struggle she was having over taking a job that paid considerably more than her current salary, or to stay in her current role, which better aligned with her values and gave her a sense of purpose. We discussed it for a little bit, and then ultimately, the deciding factor for her was calling her parents to discuss it. And based on that conversation and what they said, she decided to remain in her current role. Her parents were the key factor in this big life decision. This is really surprising to me in the moment when she said that, because I've grown up here in the West. And the West is predominantly a hyper-individualistic culture, meaning my identity is rooted in myself as the individual. I make core decisions based on what's best for me. Sociologists have observed that now for decades, this has become very true of the West. This radical individualistic view has infiltrated its way into almost any aspect of how we view life. However, my friend, she grew up in India, where the dominant culture there is a collective one, rather than an individualistic. Identity is rooted in the group, especially in the family. Decisions are made in light of what's best for the family. Christine, who was with us a few weeks ago, she described it in this way. She said, "If I succeeded, then my family is a success. And if I failed, then my family is a failure." See, this isn't just simply true for Indian culture. This is also true for Korean culture. I met a young Korean once who broke up with her boyfriend who she was in love with because her parents told her that was the best thing to do. See, this collective mindset is actually dominant throughout Asia, most of Africa, South America, pretty much most of the world except for the West and parts of Europe. And the ancient Middle East, the places where Jesus walked and lived and breathed, also holds a collectivism. In the ancient world, individual identity was primarily defined in terms of the household. You actually see the significance of family as you read the biographers. Many times when the biographers describe Jesus, they call him Jesus, son of Joseph. See, Jesus' identity was connected to the family he came from. Some of the biographers even begin with these long genealogies at the beginning of them because that was significant. Your significance was based on where you came from. You viewed life through the family unit. What was best for the family was how you decided decisions. Marriages were arranged by the family. You didn't have much say in them. Decisions were based on what was best for family, and it's in this context, it's in this reality of collectivism in which Jesus' comments here in chapter 3, his comments about family might be the most shocking and even offensive to those who are reading it. We are back in the Gospel of Mark. It's the biography of Jesus' life, the second one found in our New Testament. And as a community, our guiding light, the direction we're moving is we're trying to find a level of health in our lives, a sense of wholeness. And we believe the person of Jesus is the best model for us of how to understand how to live this human life. And so for us to understand Jesus, we need to understand his life. And so we're making our way back in the book of Mark. We took a brief pause to talk about your emotions, and now we're going to be talking about Jesus for the remainder of the summer until September. But as we go through these different stories, we're looking at how Jesus interacted with the world, how he saw things different than maybe we see things. And maybe this is more true today in this chapter than any other place. Today, we're going to look at Jesus' radical idea of community as family. So if you have a Bible, I invite you to turn back there to Mark chapter 3. You just heard it read to you. And for many of you, you most likely have heard this section of Scripture read before, or you've read it yourself. And if you're honest, you probably think this is a bit dull, a bit insignificant, a list of 12 Jewish men names. The 12 apostles it might have in your heading in your scripture. Although to modern ears, it might be inconsequential information, for ancient ears, these lists of names might be the most shocking details in Jesus' whole entire biography. Because it was not so much that Jesus chose 12 disciples to represent the 12 tribes of Israel and inaugurating a new Israel. Everyone could understand that symbolism, but it was who Jesus chose. Peter, James, and John were fishermen. Fishermen at this time was a low profession. They were not the first choice for the Jewish establishment or leadership or the religious elite. No one would be looking for fishermen to be part of this rabbi's inner circle. Thomas, who we find out to be a skeptic, who seems to be uncertain of Jesus at every turn of his life. And then you have these two characters that should never be in a group together but seem to be with Jesus. You have Simon the Zealot. And what we know about Simon, what most scholars believe, is that he was part of a revolutionary nationalist movement who was opposed to Rome. His being, his identity was to get rid of the Roman oppression. So you have Simon the Zealot, and then you also have Matthew the tax collector. You have one individual who's trying to oppose, trying to, with force and violence, get rid of the Romans, and then you have another one who is the very face of their oppression, the one who collects the taxes on the Romans' behalf. He is the one who's going forward and collecting this high levy of taxes. You have these two individuals in Jesus' inner circle. And then Mark talks about Judas Iscariot, the traitor. And I just find this fascinating because what we know about Mark's biography was written decades after Jesus' life and resurrection. And so Mark could simply remove Judas from the list. We know what happens with Judas. We know how Judas betrays Jesus. Why leave him in the 12? Well, many scholars believe that Mark intentionally leaves Judas in the 12 to communicate something around the aspect of who Jesus is. He's making a point with Jesus that even those closest to Jesus can have imperfections. That imperfection will be found all in this community. These are Jesus' 12 disciples, his inner circle. Jesus invites a diverse group of people who have no business of being together to be in community with him. Now, if this is shocking, it's not nearly as shocking as what Jesus is about to say about this group of ragamuffins. Later on in the chapter, he interacts with the Pharisees. His family is concerned about him, says, Jesus, you're going to get yourself killed if you keep acting this way. And then later in chapter 3, in verse 32, Jesus has this interesting exchange. The crowd was sitting around him, Jesus, and they told him, your mother and brothers are outside looking for you. Now remember, the dominant view of this time in ancient Israel was a collective mindset. Your ultimate allegiance was to your family. You did what was best for your family. You showed honor to your parents, and so when they call, you come. But Jesus' interaction here is so interesting. Verse 33, he says, who are my mother and my brothers? Then he looked at those seated around him, these ragamuffin gospels, these disciples, these people that have no business of being together. He looks around them, circle that's seated around them, and he says, here are my mother and my brothers. Whoever does God's will is my brother and my sister and my mother. In other words, Jesus looks at his disciples and he says, here is my family. He calls them, his disciples, his brothers. He calls those who follow him as his sisters. He calls those who are part of this community family. It is hard to communicate how revolutionary and radical this idea would have been in the first century. Jesus here is redefining what family looks like by creating a new kind of family. And what was modeled in Jesus' life with his disciples who followed him was carried on to the earliest communities of Jesus. For all the different metaphors that we have in our New Testament about what Christian community is, what the church is, of all the different metaphors, the most predominant metaphor is one of family. It's why the writers always talk about fellow apprentices of Jesus as my brother and my sister. These are my brothers and my sisters. They saw each other in familial terms. And this wasn't just nice language, this wasn't symbolism, but it was the way that they functioned. If you read Paul's letters to these churches that he plants, he puts in these letters this longing, this desire to see with great affection, to see different people. And for many of us, we read that and it's insignificant to us. But for scholars, those are the receipts of what kind of community was beginning in these places. And scholars look at the names and they begin to establish that when Paul is talking about these people he desires to see, that he sees as his brothers and sisters, they're a combination of slaves and business owners and women and men from different groups and different ethnicities. And this random group of individuals, they're functioning like a family. They're loving one another. They're being generous with what they have for one another. They're serving one another's needs. Jesus does not merely invite us to attend gatherings. He invites us into family. And what was once a core aspect, a defining characteristic of followers of Jesus when they gather together, has for the most part become a lost art. And I think there's a couple reasons for this. I think the first reason is that the church has promoted primarily the nuclear family. And of course, strong families are paramount to healthy communities. Strong marriages create strong parents, which create strong kids. We understand the importance of strong families. And we see Jesus valuing family and speaking significantly about them. But Jesus seemed to refuse to make the biological family ultimate. Equally as much as Jesus talked about the nuclear family or your biological family you're connected, he also equally talked about the family of God. He talked about the disciples and what it looks like to interact with them. But for the most part, we have neglected one for the case of the other, and Jesus says both are important. I think the second reason this has become a lost art for, I would say, modern followers of Jesus is because this idea is so radical for so many of us. This kind of commitment, it goes against the cultural norm of individualism that we have grown up with. We value our own space. We like to keep people at a distance. We don't see the church as a family. We see it as something that we participate on in our own terms. John Tyson, a pastor and intellectual from New York City, he says it well when he says it this way. We live in a relational moment where the needs of the individual have completely eclipsed the concerns of the larger community. The choice architecture of our entire lives exists to facilitate individualism rather than articulating an alternative vision the church has embraced this value. We speak primarily of a personal relationship with God as the fundamental goal of faith. And there's nothing wrong with personal faith, but the one that Jesus speaks of is fundamentally other-oriented and generally communal. If the goal of church is self, we will not fulfill Jesus' command that we be known as people of love. To summarize, Jesus' challenge is both the collectivist mindset of the first century, where its ultimate allegiance belonged primarily to one's biological family and no one else. But Jesus also challenges the hyper-individualism of the modern West, which most of us find ourselves, in which ultimate allegiance belongs to yourself. So what do we do with this? What do we do with Jesus' invitation to family here? And exactly what does it mean to be in a family? To flesh this out, I want to spend the remainder of our time to give you a few characteristics of what family looks like based on Jesus' teaching. Okay? 3 characteristics. First one, family is messy. When I paint a picture to people of Jesus' vision of a diverse group of people who sacrificially love one another, it's appealing. Most people in our city can get behind the vision of community in which Jesus sets out for us. However, as ideal and utopia sounding as Jesus' vision of community is, any one of us who have actually tried to live into this have most likely experienced how difficult it is. Like any family, this family is messy. The family of God, the family of followers of Jesus gathering together, it has its own dysfunction, just like your family has its own dysfunction. And people in churches, intentionally and unintentionally, have created hurt. And I want to be careful, because sometimes this language of family is used in ways in places like this to dismiss abuses of power or inappropriate behavior. That's not what we're talking about today. But we are talking about the reality that churches are made up of people. And I know many of your stories. And sadly, some of you have wounds and scars from being a part of a church community in your story. But I even just want to make the caveat that even healthy communities that have good structures to them and are consistent in building healthy relationships with one another, even healthy communities, they are messy as well. This family is messy. It will, or it has, caused some level of hurt at some point because I'm here. And you're here. And the nature of us being in relationships with one another is that relationships often cause our greatest hurts. And at the same time, relationships create your greatest healing. See, it's only through relationships with others that you can find the healing from your hurt that you found through relationships. Bessel van der Kolk, who wrote the significant book, The Body Keeps Score. In it, he chronicles the reality of that we as human beings, we absorb the pain. We absorb the hurt, that our body actually keeps score. It doesn't forget these things. And as he chronicles the different aspects of that, and when he gets towards the solution stage and how we can address this, he says this, I think, provocative statement. He says this: study after study shows that having a good support network constitutes to the single most powerful protection against becoming traumatized. Safety and terror are incompatible. In other words, he's saying your healing is found in healthy relationships with others. Many of us who live in Vancouver are hesitant about this kind of community. We like to keep people at a distance because it just seems easier. By keeping people at a distance, there's less chance for disagreement or conflict, and therefore potential hurt. And I'm with you. There are 1,000 reasons not to enter into Jesus' invitation of this kind of family. But I'm not so sure you'll be better off. As messy as community, as family can be, this is one of the things that I am most concerned for you. If I catch you, if I have a conversation with you, and if I catch you in the lobby as you try to sneak your way out on a Sunday, one of the questions I almost always will ask is, who are you connected with? Is there people that you know here? Are you known by anyone else? What does your community look like? Do you have people in your life? Because I've come to believe a core conviction of my life is that the thing that's going to help grow your faith, the thing that's going to help keep you grounded is the people that you have around you. The hyper individualistic lifestyle that the culture continues to advertise you day in and day out has left you feeling more alone and unable to live out the vision of life in which Jesus paints for us here. We say it all the time here, and you're probably sick of us saying it, but we never want you to lose the point of why we started Forest City. It wasn't just simply to create a great weekly event for you with tremendous programs, to build a successful nonprofit, whatever you think it is. We started Forest City to create and form a family and brothers and sisters who care for one another by being in one another's lives. Family is messy, and I have so much empathy for your hesitation to take a step in towards family because of all the messiness that you've experienced, but it's also in the reality of those relationships where we find our greatest healing as well. Family is messy. Secondly, family is enduring. Church has become, like most things in our lives, transactional. You will change your phone providers, your apartments, your workplaces, and restaurants based on how they serve you and your needs. And church, for many, is now on that list. This is one of the characteristics that moving to Vancouver for about 5 years now, I noticed to be very true about the city. That many individuals migrate from one church to another based on preference and need. Now, don't hear what I'm not saying. There are good reasons to leave a church. And there's good reasons to look for new ones. Amy and I left our church to come here to start this church. So much of the idea of the kingdom of God is about going out and starting new initiatives. It's about going. Paul left his community to start new communities. So much of what we know of Christianity wouldn't be possible if people didn't go out and do that. There are good reasons to transition. However, it's in my observation that many leave too soon and miss out the growth that awaits them if they simply stayed. The language of family, it instills a sense of enduring. It's only when we have this level of consistency that we experience the most beautiful aspects of being in a family. It's the permanence that allows us to stay long enough for the excitement of this new community to fade and to settle into the rhythm of simply showing up for our brothers and sisters. It's this idea that being part of a family is not just about what we get from it, but also about understanding what we contribute to it. It's understanding that in a family, our presence is important. It matters. More significantly, the longer you stay in a community, the deeper those relationships become, which therefore the deeper your discipleship becomes. If you leave when things become too real or too vulnerable, or where there's small levels of conflict, you miss out on the growth that happens in your life. In most cases, the longer you stay, the more you grow. because you become known. A little while back, I was sitting in a triad in our small group. It's just a group of 3 of us that get together, pray for one another at the end of small group night. And in our triad, I had someone who was across from me who's been in our group since we started it 4 years ago. And so I've got to know this individual. We've spent hours together. I've seen her in moments of great highs and also in deep lows. I've got a sense of who she is, and she was beginning to talk about how she's transitioning to a new job. She was leaving her current employment and going to a new job, and in this new job, she was be overseeing this new team. And without hesitation, I looked at her. I said, "You're going to make cookies on your first day to make a good impression, aren't you?" She smiled, looked over me. She's like, "Yeah, I'm planning on doing that." And we moved on and we prayed for one another. And later that next day, as I was on my morning walk, I was reflecting on that moment. And I was reflecting on, I know her. And she knows me. We have a sense of who each other is. I know her so much so that I knew that making a good impression is important for her. I knew she would feel some trepidation of going into a new environment, and I just knew that she likes to bake cookies to warm the environment up. And I say all that because this person was once a stranger to me and now is less of a stranger. And I say all that because what I'm trying to say is that this kind of relationship only happens when we both commit long-term to each other. When we both continue to show up and be in each other's lives, even when we're tired, even when we maybe feel, I'm not so sure if we believe the same things, or life doesn't look the same, or he's at a different spot than I am, or our lives look, there could be so many reasons for either of us to exit out. I think many in modern day Christianity understand the importance of committing to a spouse. We get that. We understand that's a long-term commitment. We don't make it lightly. Still, I think we miss Jesus' invitation of committing to a family of God, to create the kind of relationship that only happens when there's a level of enduring to it. Something happens in time that there's no shortcut to it. So families are messy, family is enduring, and finally, family is proximity. The idea of family only works with proximity. Think about your family. They're in your space, whether you want them or not. If you grew up with a large family, you had very little space. Maybe you're an empty nester and you have more, and it feels so good. But most of us like to keep people at a distance. This is becoming more and more true in the trends, and especially in urban areas like Vancouver. Even in Manhattan right now, over 72% of Manhattan apartments that are being built are one-bedroom apartments. Those who live in the suburbs, we like to go into our garages and close the garage door behind us, put up high fences, and many in suburbs don't even know their neighbors who live on their street. And again, I can understand your hesitation. This kind of community takes work. There is lots of risk involved in this. Brothers and sisters fight. If you have a brother or a sister, you know this. But there's no shortcut. It takes time and proximity. Something happens when you have people in your life, meaning specifically you have them in the spaces that you're actually doing life. Amy and I, we tried to have as many people outside our nuclear family as we possibly can. We have a suite in our house that we're connected with. Mother and daughter, she's graduating in a couple weeks. We're going to the grad. Our dog, we were doing gardening yesterday, and our dog ran up and got her prom dress all muddy. Amy solved the prom, I think. I hope so. I hope we didn't ruin prom for her. But those are kind of relationships. There's friction. These things happen. At any point, we have 9 people living in our house. A couple of them are living in independent suite, but we have other people who live with us. We have people who come over for meals or hang out in our garden or sit on our couch for a cup of coffee. Many of our church meetings, we have them in our living room. A lot of our monthly meetings, we sit around the table and we first have a meal before we get to business, because there's just something about having people in our lives. I want people in my life. I want people to know my kids. My kids have so many uncles and aunts. I have a long list of babysitters. You should get some more relationship going. We want these individuals because we understand that Jesus' invitation is not just simply about us creating a great family unit, but it's exposing our kids, it's exposing ourselves to people at different life stages and different seasons, and us by being in relationship with one another means proximity, means they're in your space. There are many moments when Amy and I would rather not have people over. Maybe it's a Monday and it's a long weekend and we know group is happening and we would rather just lock the door and make some popcorn and lay on the couch and watch our new favorite show. And sometimes you should do this. However, when I think about that, I think about Trish. Trish joined a group about over a year ago. And Trish grew up in Christianity and she grew up exposed to it, but when she came to our church and when she started interacting with our church, I met someone who was clearly trying to understand what her childhood faith and these things that she believed at earliest moments of her life and how that now makes sense of her life as a young adult. It's an important connection of trying to fit those things out, and how does following Jesus make sense of how I look at work and dating and living and all the things that I do. And slowly, over weeks and months, I could see things begin to shift for her. I could see new levels of vulnerability. I could see her opening up and sharing more of the challenges. And in each moment, I saw new signposts of growth. And then last week, I got to see her get baptized. This past Monday, 2 of the 4 people that got baptized were sitting in my living room. They're part of our small group. And I tell you all of that because those things cannot happen unless there's people in proximity with you. It means there's some sacrifice. It means showing up. And now we as a group, we get to share in that joy of being in relationship with someone else. We get more joy than you got because we are in proximity with them. So what does this mean? I'm inviting the keys to come back, and I want to give us a few steps for us. What does it mean to live in community as family? What does Jesus' invitation here? Well, first of all, community is just not some other practice that we add to our list of practices. Community is how we do all of the practices. Community, being relationships with others, is how we work out our faith. It's how we make it happen. And so some simple questions for you. Do you have people in your home? Have you been in other people's homes? You've heard us talk at length, if you've been here for a while, about small groups. Small groups are in people's homes. And the reason why we do that is something happens when you get in someone's home. Something happens when you consistently show up in a rainy Vancouver evening with a group of people. Something happens in a living room that just can't simply happen in this room. So maybe our groups are about to break for summer, but maybe this fall, maybe that's a step for you. Maybe you're part of a group, but your attendance has been inconsistent, and you don't realize that there's a part that you play in that family, that your presence is important. And maybe for some of you, this is all way too much. Your level of I'm not sure. So maybe for you, a good goal for you this summer is by September, I'm gonna go to lunch with one of these people in this room. I gotta eat anyways. I picked the restaurant. Maybe I'll even pay. But what would it look like to take one step into being known and to know others? I think Jesus' invitation to those disciples was just as radical as his invitation to you as a disciple of Jesus is today. Everything in the stream we live in is going the other direction. everything is about isolating. Everything is about keeping people at a distance, but all the things that God wants to do in your life, they happen in this dynamic of family. So what would it look like to have people in greater proximity in your life? And each one of us, that would be a different answer. You don't need to have 9 people live with you. But maybe find one person. We good for one more story? We're good. One more story. I heard someone say yes somewhere. Years ago, when I started working with a counselor, one of the exercises we did is we would do 5-year spans of my life, and I would draw a little graph, and I would mark key moments. So 0 to 5, there was very little in that. I don't remember much. 5 to 10, very little. I don't remember most. But then I got to 10 to 15, and that was like, whew, I wasn't ready for it. And as I was looking at my life, I realized that all these events seemed to happen at this one point in my life. It was between like 11 and 12. That summer, my parents separated after being together for a while. They were like, can't work anymore. We're separating. So my dad went to move somewhere else. And it meant every weekend we didn't do anything as a family because we got split up as a family. We went to different places on the weekend. I went into grade 7, which is where I went to try out for the basketball team. I've told this story before. I got to the B team. I was hoping to make the A team, follow my brother's footsteps. It didn't work out. I was a drummer, drummed all the time. The band teacher lived 2 doors down from me. He heard me drumming all the time. He knew I wanted to be a drummer, and he gave me trombone. There's 2 tracks in grade 7. You can go to one track, which is more the academic, and the other one that's not. My parents were super involved. They let me choose. I choose the non-academic one, and I got in that class the first day, and I realized all my friends went to the academic class. Needless to say, that was a really hard season. There's so many different factors in my life that made it really, really hard. And then the counselor asked me the questions that good counselors do. How did you overcome? How do you get through that season? And I was like thinking about it, and I realized it was that like same summer that I found church. Didn't grow up with it, wasn't part of my story. I stumbled into it. And as I stumbled into the small world church, maybe like 100 people max, it was in this church. Before I could fully conceptually understand the love of God, I understood the embodiment love. I had fathers when I was lacking a father. I had aunts and uncles. I had brothers and sisters. I had a sense of family when my life's family was looking pretty chaotic. I say all of that because I often say that this room speaks before any of us do on this stage. And the invitation that Jesus gives you is not simply a religious service, but it is a messy, enduring, proximate family that follows Jesus together. That's the invitation for you to step into today. So I'm going to invite you to stand if you're able. Our prayer team is coming. Our team is going to lead us in a song. But as our prayer team comes this morning, we're reminded that it's in the relationships that we find healing. And so maybe for you, maybe there's just some callous of some relationship, of some hurt. Maybe there's something that you just want to take to the Lord. Maybe there's something completely different than anything I've talked to this morning. That's great. Would you come and receive prayer? So Holy Spirit, we welcome you in this place once again. We invite your presence into our lives. And whatever the barriers, whatever the things that are holding us back to take a step into relationship, Father, may we just see the vision. May you just give us the courage. May you just give us the love to love one another as brothers and sisters. In a world that's so isolated, in a world that's so lonely, may this become a place that feels like family for those who are missing it in their lives. So Jesus, would you meet us today? May we experience your goodness, your beautiful name. Amen. Let's sing together.